So we're doing something a little different today. We're having kind of a little bit of a dialogue sermon with Catherine.
Just be glad I don't have puppets.
Yeah, would you say be glad we don't have puppets? Do we have puppets somewhere?
We do.
We probably have them in our. So, so seriously, since we're sending our kids back to school this week or the last couple of weeks, and if you don't have a kid in our children's program, or if you're not already volunteering, then you don't know what thoughtful, creative, wise stuff is happening with our kids. So this is a chance for all of us to know, so we can also be sure we welcome other people who might have little ones. But it's also a chance for us all to think about our own faith and how we came to it, and to learn a little bit more about Catherine, who is anything but an attention hog. So I have to say, I met Catherine, well, a little bit of background. She grew up in Kansas City and was ordained in in the year 2020. 2000, yeah, with the Presbyterian Church. So for the last 26 years, and before that was public school teacher. She and her husband Brian have lived in Hyde Park for 30-something years, and their two boys, Taylor and Spencer, are off making their fame and fortune in California, right? Yeah. Yeah, all of it. But anyway, so, but I met Catherine and knew of her probably around 2000. Close friend Heidi Peterson, many of you know, and then other colleagues at the church where she served for 20 years as minister of families and children. So we're going to talk a little bit, mainly more about Catherine and what we're doing here. We were both really blessed to grow up in churches with a really open-minded, open-hearted faith. That's probably unique and not, sadly, as widely practiced faith as it should be. Even growing up in Texas, I grew up, Dr. Digby was the pastor at my church for 26 years, and the church was encircled, the sanctuary, with these beautiful kind of lithograph paintings from the Hebrew Bible, from the Old Testament, from a Jewish professor that was a close friend of his. So I grew up with this sense of kind of multicultural faith. And as a little kid, we would have missionaries come, like from the Philippines, but it would be more like, I remember sitting on the Blackwood Hall floor, and they were talking to us. I was a little kid, about Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos. Does anybody, the Marcos regime, and how Imelda Marcos had thousands of pairs of shoes and everybody else. And like, we were like writing our senators. I was a little kid, right? So I grew up understanding that like faith was about justice. It was about changing the system. It wasn't like, we're going to take the gospel to these heathens. It was like, man, this is messed up, and how do we be a part of that? So that was really, I think, a way of growing up which really helped me understand faith in everywhere. So I want you to share a little bit about your own background and your family, which is rich and deep.
So I would say that my years,
Catherine,
Paula's going to make me put this up here. My years as a preacher's kid were really framed around my parents' desire for justice, for God's goodness in the world, and for faith-filled living. And only in retrospect do I see that. As a kid, I thought my mom was at church way too long and it's time to go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. But Dad took a church call here in Kansas City when I was 3, so we moved from Indianapolis. No memory of that whatsoever. But he was very intentional about seeking a place where he felt he could live out his deep desire for racial justice. So took a pastorship over on Swope Parkway at Covenant Presbyterian Church. At that point in the mid to late 60s, it was still a predominantly white working class area, but was very, very quickly changing to a multicultural, very racially diverse area. And he found that exuberant and exciting, and the possibilities seemed like this is where we can really live the kingdom of God. Again, at 3, I didn't know that. I just knew we were moving. We lived east of Paseo on Michigan Avenue and went to Francis Willard, which I do not believe is a school anymore. I don't even know what it is. So parents were very intentional about demonstrating that we are part of the community, whatever that community may look like. And so that was really important to them to demonstrate for us, and really help us live that. So one of the things that was different at that time was really trying to help not just have 1 or 2 lay leaders or the pastor be the one leading this charge, but to really grow a congregation that felt those kinds of relationships and connections. So I remember many evenings when he would come home, have dinner, and then be back out in people's homes, bringing together different folks to really try and understand one another and realize there's so much more that we share in common. And as children of God, we have a chance to really embrace each other and bring justice into this world. So that was very intentional on their part. My mom was equally a partnership in that, even though she wasn't a called minister, because I think, in a lot of times there were, probably in the 60s and 70s, you kind of got the couple, as you call the pastor to that kind of parish. So it was really a special, special place. As a kid, it was just a place where my mom glared at me from the choir loft because I was talking to my friends too much. And I don't think until I moved into some more homogeneous settings that I realized how unusual it was. That we had people from all walks of life, from lots of diverse backgrounds, economically, racially, and it just seemed normal. That was the norm. Honestly, when I went to college, I went to Trinity University in San Antonio, fairly small liberal arts college, very homogeneous population, was probably the time it hit me the most. Growing up, we went to KC public schools, so even those settings were really diverse for us. But it was a good time to begin to reckon with what that meant and why the world, even on Sunday morning, is one of the most segregated times ever. So what I grew up with was really kind of immersed in it, and then kind of beginning to understand as a result, this is not the norm, and how do we live this in a way that can really bring about people's passion for being faithful with all folks. So I think that would be kind of my church beginning in that sense. And honestly, when I left, I thought I will never work in a church, but here I am. No, just kidding. No. So one of those wrestlings that God won out on, so for sure.
Do you want to say anything about the desegregation lawsuit? She was a plaintiff in the KC-Mo desegregation lawsuit. And
so those of you that have a history with Kansas City remember this long, drawn-out desegregation suit. My mom served on the school board for 2 terms, so for 8 years, but prior to that, she had, with a lot of other civic leaders and kind of engaged parents, what they called the kitchen table cabinet. And I can remember going over to Karen Lewis's house or Judy Walthall's house, and the kids would play and the parents would sit around and figure out, how are we going to work to empower the schools to be better than they are? So one of the kitchen table cabinet meetings, they decided that they needed to sue all the outlying districts in the state of Missouri because they weren't living up to the desegregation the laws that were in place. And so my sister and I and Ed Skaggs' children, there were 4 children named as plaintiffs. Of course, we didn't ever have to testify or anything, but we were the ones that they brought the lawsuit on part of. It has been an interesting walk because I came back to Kansas City and taught in the Kansas City public schools thinking, oh, this was great, and no, it was not great for everyone. So that was another adult learning for me, was that even the right idea, the desire to bring equity, was really on the backs of the minority folks at that point. They were the ones leaving their neighborhoods to be bused into other areas to desegregate. So that fine balance of we want to make this better for you, but it still really played a role in a lot of folks' communities kind of being broken up. So it's bittersweet. And part of it is Mom, and we were kind of off the whole thing by the time Arthur Benson, and it kind of came to a head. And when what actually transpired after it was the magnet schools, I know some of you remember that, and trying to pour more money into them to try and get the facilities up and so forth. So we also, when I moved back here from Texas, felt very drawn, guilted, I don't know what the word would be, to put our kids in Kansas City public schools. It was a great experience for us. Not for everybody, but it was a great experience for us. And it was really important. I could hear my mom calling out to me. She's like, you will be fine. We are there to make sure we build community and help everybody else be fine. And I kind of felt that from my boys too. I'm like, you're going to be fine. You have family members, you have extended friends that will help you get what you need, but we have a chance to build community here. So they went to Kansas City Foreign Language Academy, so it was a Spanish immersion program, and then graduated from Lincoln College Prep, and then left me and went to California. What is that about? Apparently I didn't do something right, but no, so it has been an, I'm sorry, Paula's like, get the closer. It's been an interesting journey to really grow up in what just seems so natural to me, but then as an adult to look back and kind of make some understandings and some evaluations of what was working and who had to sacrifice more with the desegregation suit. I think it really kind of was a play. But, all the intention was to really try and live out God's call to justice and a kingdom of peace and equity for all of us. So, yeah.
Well, I wanted to kind of follow that up with, the reality of that being a really gifted family and community and experience to go with, of thinking about how these days, and maybe when we were younger too, especially now, so many people grow up in a family where there's just almost no faith. or no faith expressed. I don't know, the nuns, NONES is kind of the largest growing category. But more damaging probably are people who grow up in situations where faith is really wounding, where the racism, the homophobia, the constrictive, dogmatic, this is what faith is. And I think one of the things that's been surprising to me as a pastor has been how consistently and how much people have shared with me the damage they experienced growing up in church. I mean, just just it goes on and on and on and on, and how deeply those wounds people can hold. I mean, not to say they shouldn't, but they can stay really deep. And so, trying to figure out how, again, do we model something different? And I want you to share more about the Worship and Wonder program and kind of the approach, because it really is, I think, a way of respecting children, respecting all of us. And I think we try to do that too in sermons, rather than just like, this is what it is, like kind of invitational. How does this scripture inform us and that kind of thing? So will you kind of share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and again, kind of from what I grew up with was just such an intentional sense of community. And that is one of the things that I think really gels with me here at Peace, is you all welcome everyone. And it's not just perfunctory, it is genuine and it is authentic. We don't have to have a committee of greeters, because you all are greeters. You all are welcomers, which is amazing. And watching you interact with the kids when they come out and knowing that you have built a relationship with them is so important. One of the things that I feel as a Christian educator is really essential is that we first of all acknowledge that kids have a relationship with God. I mean, from the beginning, they have a relationship with God. Whether they have the tools and the skills and the names for what that is a whole different thing. But they have a relationship with God. They are part of God's goodness. They understand what they want to be in the world in terms of loving and caring for others. Sadly, the world may tend to tilt them in a different way. But Worship and Wonder takes that foundation, that children have a relationship with God. And what we are trying to avoid doing is getting them, kind of like you said, to a point in their lives where they're like, wait a second, none of that makes sense with the way I see the world. So Worship and Wonder tells stories in a Montessori way with very simple pieces. A lot of them don't even have faces, just kind of generic shapes that look like a person. And it uses language that is very open. So we're teaching the biblical stories, but with wording that can kind of let the child begin to adapt and understand what it might mean in their life, how they see it. Instead of getting to middle school and being like, how did God make the world in 6 days? That doesn't make any sense. So really leaving them open to put their own understanding and their relationship with God at the center of that story. It also leaves a time for wondering, which I think is so important for kids, well, for all of us these days. We all have attention spans that are fried and gone and distracted. So at the end of the storyteller will just kind of start with wondering questions. I wonder what you think about that. I wonder why Jesus said that. No right or wrong answers, but just the chance to model that it's okay to question. It's okay not to know. It's engaging in your faith by sort of thinking about things and wondering them at whatever age level you may be at. So it's one of my favorite parts of being able to engage with children, because it is so open. Anyone can do it. It actually is a great adult program too. Brad, if you ever need anything to fill in, we can come to a Worship and Wonder story with your Bible study. But it really, I think, lifts up the child as whole and healthy to begin with, and then helps give them some spiritual tools to engage in what they understand their relationship with God is, and then what that calls them to be in this world. And I really celebrate how Peace does that so genuinely, not just with the children, but with the adult congregation too. It is a special and unusual place. I've visited around a lot, as I know you all have too, but to walk into a place like this and feel immediately the presence of God and the enthusiasm for living God's justice and love in the world is just incredibly special. And it does trickle down. The kids, as Holly said, when the kids come in, they sense that, they understand that, they know that they are welcome here and that they are part of God's plan and purpose. So I think, did that say enough about Worship and Wonder? Because I could go on a lot more. I could get slides out if you need it. So just let me know.
Well, and we also, we could have another training for that sometime too, because she had a training once, and maybe a dozen. I know a lot of people.
Mary Lee and Lauren and
we've kind of
Melissa. We have 3 or 4 that float in and help.
Yeah, but it's good to, if that's the kind of thing that if you enjoy working with kids, or didn't like, you could also learn the Bible stories again. So it'd be a good thing for all of us, right? Let's see. I also wanted. There was at least a couple other things in here. Well, I guess I was just thinking about also the truth that as much as we try to create this space where our kids can, attend to their own faith and grow and stretch, there's also like this freshness that no one can really control the Spirit of God. Mm-hmm. And I think all of us have had moments, and Brad kind of alluded to that so beautifully in his prayer, where, you've been sort of struck by a moment of presence, and I think what Peace is trying to do is kind of set a table for kids, or set a place where that can be nourished and grow. And I wanted to share one moment in my own life, and then so I had a moment that has really stayed with me. When I was a kid, we went on maybe one of the very first Habitat for Humanity trips, and we went down to, like Millard Fuller, the founder, and Jimmy Carter. I was telling Joe yesterday, don't you miss that peanut farmer? God, there was a lot to be said for that. But anyhow, we went to this mission trip in Beaumont, and I remember we were staying in, I don't know, some school, and we had to shower with just a water hose. And I had never seen poverty like that. I had never seen poverty like that. I mean, and you're just in my own state. And I still remember going to this woman's house, and, literally, she was old and she was blind, and, just her room and the kitchen, and there's a picture of me up on her roof, because we were re-roofing her house, which is just frightening. But I remember having a real strong feeling like this is not moral failure on anyone's part. This is systemic injustice, and just knowing that so deeply. And she came out there and she preached to us. I've got a picture of her. I've always had this picture because it's just been the faith and the care and the love she exuded. It's just really stayed with me. Mm-hmm. And just as that feeling of call, and just kind of, knowing deeply, this is where life happens, is, their life is wounding. There's so much, even like you're sharing of the desegregation lawsuit, even people well-meaning still made decisions that ended up in some ways not leading to the kind of just outcome we wanted. But do you decide that we're going to all be here together or not? So that's kind of an experience. And again, we can't manufacture those experiences for our kids, but we can try to create a space where they're alive and those moments happen.
Well, and I'd like to share, I'm much better at using somebody else's words to explain things that I feel, but I want to share a story. Anne Lamott, most of you know her as a writer and wonderful commentary and so forth. She shared a story long ago about why I make Sam go to church. And for me, it has been such a central part of what I understand church can be for children and for families and for all of us. So if you will indulge me in listening to Anne share about Sam. Sam is the only kid he knows who goes to church, who is made to go to church 2 or 3 times a month. He rarely wants to go. Well, that's not exactly true. The truth is he never wants to go. What young boy would rather be in church on the weekends than hanging out with a friend? It doesn't help him to remind him that once he's there, he enjoys himself, that he gets to spend time drawing in the little room outside the sanctuary, that he only actually has to sit still and listen during the short children's sermon. It does not help that I always pack some snacks and Legos and his art supplies and bring along any friend of his whom we are able to lure into our churchy web. It does not help that he genuinely cares for the people there. All that matters to him is that he alone among his peers is forced to spend Sunday morning in church. You might think, noting the bitterness, the resignation, that he was being made to sit through a 6-hour Latin Mass, or you might wonder why I make the strapping, exuberant boy come with me most weeks. And if you were to ask, this is what I would say. The main reason is that I want to give him what I have found in the world, which is to say, a path and a little light to see by. Most of the people I know who have what I want, which is to say purpose, heart, balance, gratitude, and joy, are people with a deep sense of spirituality. They are people in community who pray or practice their faith. They are Buddhists, Jews, Christians, people banding together to work on themselves and for human rights. They follow a brighter light than the glimmer of their own candle. They are part of something beautiful. I saw something once from the Jewish Theological Seminary that said, a human life is like a single letter of the alphabet. It can be meaningless, or it can be part of a great meaning. And I just want to say thank you to Peace for being that community, not only for our children, but for the families and for each other. It's just a very special place, and in this moment in time, a place that many, many people need. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Yay.